Welcome to our study of Excellent Path to Enlightenment. Good morning. As always, kindly generate the intention to apply this in order to attain perfect Samyak Sambuddha, perfect enlightenment. And our motivation for doing this is that we might serve all sentient beings to liberate them from suffering, establish them on the level of enlightenment. So presently in the study of the Excellent Path, we've arrived at the contemplating the unsurpassable qualities of liberation. Actually, in the context of the Ngondro, a few people said, well, if you look at the words of my perfect teacher, there's not a whole lot written about it. And my standard answer has actually been to just read life stories of great masters. We'll look at it here as it is explained here, but sometimes it's you can talk about the inconceivable qualities, but it's so often reflected in the lives of great masters. Yeshe Tsogyal's life. Who do we have? Shapka, Milarepa, and so forth. So these are, of course, you can say, indications of what liberation is about. At the same time, there probably is somewhere some more material on it, but I think that's one thing that we could do to gain some idea of the value and the qualities of liberation. In terms of the 12 teachers of Dzogchen that we've been looking at, the last one is actually Buddha Shakyamuni. So he's regarded as obviously the Buddha of our age. He came and taught and this is then the era in which his teaching prevails. So he is the one that we regard as the most recent of the 12 teachers of Dzogchen. And it says again, in the perfect place of Anatta, Pindada's pleasure grove. This was the Buddha's sponsor. He was a king, and many of the teachings that we have, many of the sutras were expounded in this place that he offered to the Buddha and his followers. So there, the perfect teacher taught his retinue of 4 groups the perfect teachings of the 4 truths, meaning the 4 noble truths, in the manner of the Dharma wheel turned 12 times. These 12 turnings were on impermanence, suffering, emptiness, egolessness, origin, the aspects of causes and conditions, path, reason, cessation, peace, and perfection. This was during the time when a lifespan could last 100 years. So this is then in our era. So he's then counted as the last of the 12 teachers. Actually, in my little collection of Nyujo Khyentse Rinpoche's tankas, I'm not sure. Somehow my nomadic existence has led to the disappearance of the last tanka. Anyway, this is Buddha Shakyamuni from another tanka. Okay, so Khyentse Rinpoche writes, the unsurpassable qualities of liberation. If you think about all the different states you can experience in samsara, and realize that nothing is beyond suffering, strong feelings of weariness and sadness will arise in you. You will wonder, how can I ever free myself from this suffering? This is called the feeling of renunciation, the desire to get out of samsara. It is the basis and starting point of Dharma practice. So that the mere fact that we actually conceive of that there could be more than suffering indicates there's a place within us that has that intelligence that recognizes the potential for no suffering. And this, we would say, is an indication of our Buddha nature. And in this way, we sometimes would say that suffering is an indication of Buddha nature. And this is then from the place where we then engage on the path. When we talk about the feeling of renunciation, the Tibetan Ngöndro, I think I've said a few times, the Tibetan literally means the determination to be free. So this is where we're ill, we don't want to be ill, and we want to be cured. So we pursue the causes and conditions of liberation, with that determination that we no longer wish to suffer. When someone is thrown into prison by a tyrant day and night, he will think, how miserable am I? How can I get out of here? Who can help me? These will be his only thoughts. In the same way, once you recognize there is no satisfaction in samsara but only suffering, you will think, how can I get free? Who can help me? What are the means to obtain liberation? When you reflect on this deeply, it will become clear that you need the help of a spiritual teacher, and you must avoid the kinds of actions that lead to suffering, and that you must cultivate those that bring happiness. This is the way to tread the path of the Dharma. Okay, so the benefits of the liberation here is then implicit in our determination to follow the path. So continues here. Crossing the threshold of the Dharma does not mean outwardly adopting different manners and appearance. It means becoming aware of the shortcomings and endless misery of samsara and of the unchanging qualities of liberation. So again, we can see there's suffering in the world, but very often, certainly in the modern world, there's not really the notion of liberation. If you remember in the Buddha's life, he encountered the four events that changed his life was seeing old age, sickness, and death, and then seeing a mendicant. And in this way, in the Buddha's horizon, as an expression, you could say, of his potential for awakening, he saw a mendicant, he saw a yogi, somebody who had left the world behind. And in this way, he identified the possibility of liberation. In the modern world, there's far between these. You might find people who seem to be, liberated or very free and so on, but actually the notion of a path, an actual path to liberation, is very much unknown in the modern world. In the modern world, the pinnacle of what we could achieve is normality. We could have a freedom from mental suffering. We could have the necessities that provide meet our basic needs. And so the notion of liberation, enlightenment, and so forth is rather absent in in modern civilization. So this is why we benefit a lot from reading the lives of great teachers, the life of Milarepa, Shabgai, Yeshe Tsogyal. There are quite a few, and so particularly us, we need to read these, and we shouldn't read them as if they are about Tibetans or about Asians. That's not the point. There's, of course, some differences in the cultural context, but the main point is really that somebody is working with their mind, and that's what's so important. Dealing with the emotional and the cognitive obscurations. That's the point. So we should see the universality and the applicability of their example. So Khyentse Rinpoche goes on to say, otherwise, if you fail to recognize the suffering inherent in samsara and lack the incentive to get out of it, however interesting you may find the teachings, you'll be more concerned with how to become richer, how to increase your status, how to become more powerful, and so on. And this very often happens also in the modern context, where the practice of Dharma is seen a little bit as a luxury. Very often people say, well, let's just get down to relative truth, they call it, or let's get real. We need to address the immediate issues, and then they're distracted by what they think is the real issues. The real issue is that we're dying fast, and all these other concerns are really secondary, superficial, and we are so fooling ourselves if we think that we're dealing with what's real when we attend to these. There's no question we need to pay tax, we need to have a house, we need to have a job, we need to attend to families, we need to attend to all of these. But at the same time, we should be clear that what really is primary particularly then if we have seen the value of the teaching, is the practice. And there are so many ways in which we can practice throughout all the various activities. So that's where we need to be clear on what's priority and what's what. And Khyentse Rinpoche then goes on to say, with this sort of motivation, meaning with this sort of motivation, any seemingly good action you may do will have little effect in freeing you and other beings from samsara. So if we really aren't just concerned about these superficial aspects of our lives, then we're not going to get very far. Not much will change. You must realize that, just like yourself, all living beings are subject to suffering. Have the courage to think, I will have to be able to free all sentient beings by myself. So we have this sense of, I'm going to do it. I can't expect others to do it. I can't expect my friends in the Sangha to behave perfectly. I can't expect this to happen or that to happen. I can rely on myself, and that's what's going to be the vehicle for my liberation and the path. So in order to do this, the first step is to free myself, to achieve perfection and attain enlightenment. This must be the root motivation for practicing the Dharma. With such an attitude, you will gradually deepen your spiritual experience, achieve realization, and thus become truly able to help other beings. So with that autonomy then, we persevere. So this is then the really the foundation for liberation. So this constitutes the explanation on the qualities of liberation, and it's really here more explained in terms of having the realization of suffering and the determination to pursue the path. And in addition to that, then, like I said, read the life stories of the great teachers. The great teachers really are. They have to become part of our culture, and so in a teaching like this, for example, we don't have a lot of graphs and grids and lists. Well, there's a few lists, obviously, but for example, the image, the illustration, the material in this book is mainly teachers. So the teachers of the various traditions, because that really is what this is about. It's about that which is intangible, what really is key in our life, the source of our being, the realization or non-liberation of our mind makes all the difference. And so those who have achieved liberation, they're the expression of the qualities and the validity of the path. So here we have a representative of one of the great lineages of Tibetan Buddhism, the Kadampa lineage, which in these days is, we can say roughly, corresponds to the Gelug tradition. The Gelug tradition, the main sort of the core of the Gelug tradition really goes back to the Kadampa lineage. And here we have these are actually previous incarnations of the Khyentses. So Dilgo Khyentse Rinpoche, Jamyang Khyentse Wangpo, Tsongsa Jamyang Khyentse Rinpoche, and so on, they are seen as reincarnations of various great masters that occurred in the history of Tibetan Buddhism. And so to celebrate this non-sectarian angle that all the various teachings converge into one wisdom intent, then we have representations of these various masters from the different lineages, and which are also then previous incarnations of the Khyentse Rinpoches. So here we have Drumtonpa. Drumtonpa was a layman, and I won't go into his life now, also for the reason that I actually don't know a whole lot about him, to be honest. But he was the main teacher, he was the main student of Atisha. So when we have the second wave of translation that happened in Tibet, it was very much in conjunction with a great master called Atisha that came to Tibet, and his teaching was very much centered around the establishing the basics of the Mahayana teacher. He was, of course, a Vajrayana practitioner as well, but he really emphasized the foundations of the Mahayana in his teachings. So he was very important, and his main student then was Drumtonpa, who was a layman, and in fact, all right now I can remember about Drumtonpa is that, in words of my perfect teacher, in talking about good heart, Samba Zangpo, then an example of that is Atisha, who when he was not well, when he was sick, then he would just ask Drumtonpa to hold his hand, because he said, Drumtonpa, you have such a good heart. There's not a lot of knowledge about Drumtonpa's life, I have to admit, but at the same time, I always found it very touching, and I think a really important point. So but of course, Drumtonpa was a vastly learned and accomplished person, and he then had several students that went on to basically all the teachings, for example, on Lojong we have coming down from Atisha and Drumtonpa and the lineage from then on. So this is the Kadam tradition, and also, unfortunately, we don't have it in large, but you have then different masters of the Kadam lineage depicted around Drumtonpa. Okay. There's a few questions. Okay. Good morning. I'm late. Sorry. Okay. The good news is I actually don't know if you're late, so. But anyway, welcome. Thank you very much. Thank you. Since I started the Vajrasattva practice in the Nyingtik Ngondro, I feel lots of energy circulating. I'm doing physical exercise and eating heavier foods, but the energy continues growing. I'm sleeping less than usually, and now while I'm doing inner mandala, I feel my mind agitated. I would like to listen to your comments about that and some suggestions. Are you doing Vajrasattva? Oh yeah, in conjunction. Oh yeah, of course, indeed. Well, look, Vajrasattva practice is purification. So, with the four powers, which is really the key thing of Vajrasattva practice, in the Kyentse Nyingtik, there's the practice is, if you're used to this kind of practice, of course it's fine, but for some it might be new, this kind of approach to practice. It involves some yoga and so on. Then it's important to remember the main thing in Vajrasattva practice is understanding that we have some obscurations, they need to be purified. And we do these on the basis of the four powers. And so when you do that, then there will very likely be signs of being lighter, being more energetic, and basically freeing up of what normally weighs on us. It's very much about cleaning up our case history, so to speak. It's about us, dealing with what really holds us back. And this is, of course, then the obscurations, the negative actions, and so on, which in the practice of Vajrasattva, then we're clearing away. We're basically clearing the slate. So this will happen. So yes. Look, it sounds like you're doing the right thing. Then just doing physical exercise, and if you feel the need for heavier foods, that's fine. That's fine. More energy is a good thing. And unless you're becoming sleepless, then also sleeping less might be all right. Yeah. Just when we talk about the Kadampa tradition, just note that Actually, in Tibet, it's funny, in Tibet, the Gelug tradition, which evolved on the basis of Tsongkhapa's teachings, Tsongkhapa, who was a great master, because they were founded on the Kadampa teachings. In Tibet they were referred to as the New Kadampas sometimes, but then they are generally known as the Gandinpa or Gelug tradition. Of course, nowadays there's another sort of unfortunate episode in Tibetan Buddhism, which is this what they call themselves the New Kadampa, which is actually a anti Dalai Lama clique. And even though they do teach Buddhist teaching, a key element of their agenda is really the undermining the Dalai Lama's authority and the Dalai Lama's role. So we have this unfortunate hiccup in contemporary Buddhism. So yes, so make clear, when we say Kadampa are teachers and Drumtenpa lineage, then it has nothing to do with these people that call themselves the New Kadampas. Anyway, Drumtenpa, D-R-O-M, Drum, T-O-N-P-A. Let's just see. I think it's spelled somewhere. Here we go. Drumtenpa, I don't know if you can see it down there. D-R-O-M-T-O with an umlaut and then N-P-A. Yeah, Drumtenpa. Would you post the pictures of the 12 teachers? Okay, like I say, I've presently, I don't have them. I don't have them all. I'm missing one, but I'll post the ones I have. What are the 4 powers? We'll look at that in the Vajrasattva. These are the power of support. So there's somebody there. The power of regret, being clear, I don't want to be doing this. The power of vow or determination, I shan't do that. And then the power that comes from actually then following through. So these are the four powers. We'll talk more about that in the context of the Vajrasattva. Okay, the need to follow a spiritual teacher. Parents, friends, and ordinary teachers cannot help you achieve liberation. Sorry, I should mute myself when I do that. For they're not free from samsara themselves. So, as much as we love our parents and all of that, and we can respect them and all of that, they are not free from samsara. They're not free from the notion of self, other, which is duality, and they have attachment, aversion, and so forth. So they might be great people, but at the same time, they have no capacity to really free us. To attain enlightenment, you must have the guidance of an authentic spiritual master. Without a spiritual master, you will get nowhere, like a passenger in an airplane without a pilot. So do not overestimate your capacities. Having sought and found a qualified master endowed with wisdom, compassion, and ability, follow him with confidence, receive his instructions, and practice them with diligence. So, of course, a lot of people are sort of attracted to the notion of Buddhism, Dharma, all of that, the spiritual path, but without knowing how to do it, and just having a sort of a notion that, oh yeah, I'll figure this out on my own, when nobody's going to go anywhere. It's of course common again in a culture where you don't really have many enlightened persons around. So in so many ways, you can see the modern people are it's understandable that that happens. But the reality is, unless we have somebody who knows what's going on here, especially because this is not just about data, it's not about words, it's not about things that can be read and learned from a book. Because it's that intangible quality of enlightenment, there has to be somebody who is there, real, and who works with our confusion and embodies where it is we're heading. So that's where, having sought and found a qualified master endowed with wisdom, compassion, and ability, these being the three qualities really of enlightened beings, we should then follow him or her with confidence. We receive their instructions and practice with diligence. So that's where we then listen to what they have to say, see if what we're doing coincides with what they have recommended, and then we persevere in this. The contemplation of these 6 topics here, which are then precious human rebirth, impermanence, the shortcomings of samsara, karma, the benefits of liberation, and the need to follow a spiritual master. These 6 topics, the contemplation of these, in the practices that follow, are commonly known as ngöndro, or preliminary practices. But preliminary does not imply that these practices are of lesser importance. A solid foundation is essential if the house is to be sound. The same is true of Dharma practice. So being attracted to all sorts of teachings here and there and going here and there and so on, having moments of inspiration that then fades and so on, we never really get to establish a solid ground of spiritual peace, insight, and the qualities that come from that. So the preliminary practices are absolutely essential. One of Dilgo Khyentse Rinpoche's students, who became a very important practitioner of the Khyentse Nyingtik, he practiced 19 ngöndros, and we can hear about other great masters who similarly practiced numerous ngöndro practices. The mother of Tugu Chögyinima and Choling Rinpoche, the wife of Tugu Ujin, did a number of ngöndros also, and when she passed away, then had countless signs of attainment and was in general also regarded as a great master. So we have so many examples really of practitioners who focus on the ngöndro practice. Although we do 100,000 prostrations, of course, in the present ngöndro context, it's a little bit different. We do it according to time. Anyway, although we do 100,000 prostrations and the same number of recitations of each of the 5 ngöndro sections, again, in the context of the ngöndro, we're doing it by time. So, anyway, practicing the ngöndro is not simply a practice of counting up numbers. The real point of these preliminaries is to appreciate that this human life offers a rare opportunity for one to achieve liberation and to realize the urgency of doing so to generate a strong conviction that the ordinary samsaric condition produces only suffering, and to realize that suffering comes about through karma and is the effect of negative actions. So this is where we can understand how we get into trouble. We're naturally in possession of the purity of enlightenment, but it's covered. And we need to understand how this got covered. So this is where we realize that presently we have an opportunity to do something about it. When we have a genuine understanding of these 4 points, the main point of ngöndro has been realized. Again, realizing that we have an opportunity, it won't last, something needs to be done, and the responsibility for doing it lies with us. So, Khyentse Rinpoche says, you should not merely think about them, but experience them in your very being. The correct practice of the preliminaries is to make this experience part of yourself. So we're not imposing something like, this is what I want to do, but then I have to do the ngöndro. Like they're two different things. If we understand what ngöndro is about, then that is who we are. This is becoming what we truly are. It's being true to ourselves. Otherwise, we're hypocrites. We want happiness, and yet we're doing everything to undermine happiness. We think there's suffering in the world, and we want to help the world, but we're actually not helping the world at all. We're continuing practices that just drive ourselves down, make us more unhappy, and renders us incapable of benefiting anyone, even ourselves. So the practice of ngöndro is in no way external to ourselves. It's enabling us to blossom, to realize what we are. So he said, Khyentse Rinpoche goes on to say, do not think that the ngöndro is a sort of simple beginner's practice, or that it is not as profound as Mahamudra, the great seal, or Atta Yoga, the great perfection. In fact, the preliminary practice comes at the beginning precisely because it is of such crucial importance and is the very basis of all other practices. So if we're drawn to the practice of Dzogchen, it's not enough that we're just drawn to the theoretical aspect of it, even though it's very intuitive in terms of understanding it. It's something that's comforting to think we have Buddha nature, it's naturally perfect. Yes, that's wonderful. But unless we actually turn it into experience, it's just thought. And so the teachers wishing us to have genuine experience, they provide a path that is a catalyst that enables this experience, not just the thought, but the actual experience and realization to take place. If we were to go straight to the so-called main practice without the preparation of the ngöndro, it would not help us at all. Our minds would be unprepared and untamed. It would be like building a beautiful house on the surface of a frozen lake. It simply would not last. The purpose of generating a strong feeling of renunciation or disgust towards samsara is to lead one gradually to the state of Buddhahood. Dharma practice is a little difficult in the beginning, but as one progresses, it becomes easier and easier. Worldly activities, on the other hand, are very easy and enjoyable to start with, but in the long run, they bring more and more suffering. So we might be familiar with ordinary worldly activities, and because we're so familiar with them and because we think, oh yeah, I have to deal with this now, then we forget anything else and we just sort of have tunnel vision on these very unimportant activities. And at the end, we're just left with nothing. We end our lives and have achieved nothing except just making the causes of more suffering. In all the stages of the practice, we must always remember clearly that we're practicing for the sake of all sentient beings. All sentient beings is not a definite number, for the number of sentient beings is boundless and infinite like space. If we dedicate every one of our actions to the welfare of all beings, the benefit of these actions will remain and grow until we achieve enlightenment. So our intention of enlightenment is more than just ourselves, and it's more just than just the people that we like. It's just the acceptance that all sentient beings are related to us. There's not a single sentient being that is less. There's not a single sentient being that we should care more for or care less about. All sentient beings equally need this, and the thing is also, if our path is dedicated to all beings, it has a much vaster scope than if it's more sort of just a little private precious project for the precious select few. So when we dedicate the benefit of whatever practice we do to all sentient beings, it has so much more greater benefit. We might sometimes think, well, all sentient beings are that's a lot. and we might have a sort of a literal sense like, well, when exactly am I going to enter into nirvana? When am I going to have a break? And the interesting thing is we're not the very one that wants a break. That's the very one that is the cause of our suffering. So there's never ever a notion that enlightenment is has sort of two aspects. There's a work week, right? We have 5 days work week having sentient beings, and then we retire to nirvana, or we eventually retire into nirvana. We've worked a long, hard slog for sentient beings, and then we can retire and all's good. So that's not really the nature of enlightenment. The nature of enlightenment, of course, we can say until all sentient beings are liberated, but the whole notion of time and space is so relative. So on the ultimate level, we need to give up this whole idea of one day. And also on the immediate level, we could say, if we're just thinking of enlightenment in terms of still wanting something, some one day it'll be over, then we miss the point about enlightenment. It never is about us and us working and then stopping. It's about freeing ourselves from this limited notion of self and the duality, and with enlightenment, then naturally there's a continuous outpouring of compassionate activity that's ceaseless. It's like if we think of the sun, it's not as if the sun takes a break from shining, and similarly also enlightenment never takes a break from being present in whatever, according to whatever needs there might be of sentient beings. The preliminary practice includes the recitation of verses in the text. Here, for the first part, recite the following. So if you're doing then the shorter ngöndro, this is then what we, in the morning then, when we wake up, just sit a little bit, ground the mind, and then we expel the stale breath. Actually, somebody recently taught me in yoga, this is called Nadi Shodhana. And then you close the left nostril, you expel the stale breath to the right, and consider that all the traces of aggression have been removed. Then you inhale all the blessings of all the Buddhas, what we call all the wisdom, strength, and compassion. We consider we inhale that, comes in, and then in the place of what we just exhaled, we then inhale the qualities of enlightenment, and then closing the right nostril, then we expel through the left nostril. And there we consider that we expel all the traces of all attachment. And then again, inhaling the qualities of enlightenment, then again we expel from both, considering that we expel all the traces of ignorance. So, and then again we breathe in the qualities of enlightenment, and we do this cycle 3 times. So this we do at the beginning of the day. Now, don't ask me questions about this. This is just one way of explaining it. There's so many different ways of doing it. There's all sorts of ways of starting at one side, the other side. Some are, you have all sorts of yogic things happening when you do this. There's many different ways of doing it. So, but the basic thing is we clear our physical body of the energy of attachment, aversion, and ignorance. That's the main point. And then we settle a little bit. And then we begin the calling the teacher or invoking enlightenment. Now, in the case of the Longchen Nyingtik, this is a bit longer. In the case of the Dunjam Tesa ngöndro, it's done differently, the Chetsun Nyingtik, and so on. Every ngöndro has a way of invoking the presence of the teacher, the blessing. The atmosphere is so different when there's the presence of the teacher. So that's what we do then. And then, and that we call session preliminaries. Then here and that's here in this context, this is just summed up under the simple mantra, Lama Kyeno. Lama, you are privy to knowing everything that's happening with me, and you, in that you are present within me, you bless me, protect me, empower me, and so forth. So that's just the Lama Kyeno. So then we chant the following lines, which are then bringing home the points that we've just discussed here, these 6 reflections. So it says, now that I possess these freedoms and endowments, so difficult to obtain and of such importance, may I arouse my mind by remembering the impermanence of the universe and beings, to free myself truly from the ocean of suffering of the 3 worlds, without confusing what is to be adopted and what is to be abandoned. May I persevere in the path. So this brings home these what we call the outer or common preliminaries. Khyentse Rinpoche says, in some other ngöndro practices, the Longchen Nyingtik ngöndro, for instance, the text one recites is far and more detailed than this. It's far more detailed than this. But however long or short it is, to recite the text without being aware of its meaning and purpose is completely useless. We must change. What must change is the way we perceive the outer world. We must become truly convinced that in the ordinary state of samsara, there is nothing but suffering. We must constantly keep in mind impermanence, the relentless passage of time, and the imminence of death. We need to be careful of our actions and should never dismiss the law of karma or cause and effect as unimportant. We must recognize the need to achieve liberation and the need to rely upon a spiritual teacher to do so. Then the meaning of the teaching will truly become part of ourselves. This is very important. So, getting the big picture of this means simply just recognizing our situation and what must be done. It's not a question of doing some Buddhist practices or doing something that's external to us. It's simply just doing what we know needs to be done. So we needn't really get. This is not difficult to understand. What the difficulty here lies in our habitual patterns that somehow take us away or sort of covers us with a fog of unawareness. But when we are aware, then all of these things make perfect sense, and they then are the foundation for the actual practice of the ngöndro that now follows. So these are sometimes referred to as the thoughts that change the mind, lodok. Sometimes we say lodok namshi, then that refers to the first 4 of these. But in the Longchen Nyingtik, we also then include the contemplating the benefits of liberation and attending a spiritual teacher. Can I see if there's any questions? So somebody says sometimes when there's time constraint, could one just do the breath in one session and the rest later? No, the expelling of the breath takes 2 minutes, and it's something we should actually do at the beginning of any session. And also then the invoking of the teacher. These are called session preliminaries. And then we should actually do something. So if we, for example, have, if we're doing the ngöndro, then if we have 30 minutes, then we do the session preliminaries. In the case of the short ngöndro that we have here, this can be done within 5 minutes, really. And then we do then if we're doing in the case of the ngöndro, then we're doing 96 hours of contemplating the different reflections. We then spend the remainder of the time doing that. But it's difficult to break a session down into something shorter than 30 minutes, even though Khyentse Rinpoche, he once, in the context of in earlier days, but there was something he called Dharma Das, and there he would say at least do, I think he said 10 minutes. But I just think that was sort of more with other things, and I think if we're doing the ngöndro practice, probably good to, well, if we can't, then do 2 times 15. But I would say even so, if we're just doing 15 minutes sessions and then doing twice in a day, then at least do the expelling of the breath, and if not, then at least just calling the teacher at the beginning of the session, and then do the reflections. Yeah. But we wouldn't do the exhalation of the breath in one session and then nothing else, and then do things later. Yeah. Okay. All right. The extraordinary preliminaries. So the Tibetan is Tunmin or Tunmon Marimba. So we talk about Tunmon and Tunmon Marimba. So the what we have looked at right now is what we call the common preliminaries, the general preliminaries, and now we have the special preliminaries or the uncommon. And these are then the 5: taking refuge, developing bodhicitta, the purification, accumulation, and guru yoga. So in this context, we begin with the refuge, and there's different refuges. There's different tankas of refuges, but the main thing really is the presence of the teacher, and if we like, also then remember the teacher's teacher, teacher's teachers, the lineage, and then also, if we're practitioners of Vajrayana, we can include visualization of the 3 roots, and of course, mustn't forget the three jewels: the Buddha, Dharma, and the Sangha. All of these, of course, constitute the refuge tree, where we can see them in terms of a tree. We can also see them sometimes we could see them in terms of sitting in space, particularly if we just have the teacher and so on. But we generally do talk about the refuge as visualized in the context of a tree, somewhat vast tree, in which we have all what we call the 3 jewels and the 3 roots, in the center of which is then the teacher. Good. Okay. The inner part of the ngöndro, or preliminary practice, starts with the teachings on refuge, the gateway to the path. So this we always say, taking refuge is the gateway to all the Buddhist paths. In whom do we take refuge? In the 3 jewels, known to the Tibetans as the 3 rare and supreme ones. Konchok Sum, that's the Tibetan. Tri Ratna in Sanskrit, meaning the 3 jewels. They are the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. It is important to recognize the value of the 3 jewels. The first jewel is the Buddha. His qualities are displayed in the 3 kayas: the Dharmakaya, or the absolute body. This is the condition of not being deluded. This nature has nothing in and of itself that can be characterized, understood of anything. This is then the recognition of reality, in which there's not something to be understood, but rather just the falling away of duality, of obscuration, and so forth. So this is the condition of enlightenment, and this is then referred to as the body of truth or the body of Dharma, the Dharmakaya. The Sambhogakaya, or the body of perfect enjoyment, which is then all the qualities that are inherent in this nature. While we sort of, with our neurosis and shrinking away from awakening and into this condition of self, we have all sorts of things that are happening, but they're all sort of like things around me and my struggles with the world and so forth. And when there's no longer that, then all this potential of the mind is freed. And so then we have all the qualities of the of enlightenment, which is referred to as the aspect of the dimension or the body of enjoyment. Now this quality is manifest, and so for those with the highest faculties, they can perceive the Sambhogakaya. We have stories of teachers that can relate to this dimension of enlightenment. But in general, us sentient beings, we don't really, we're sort of obscured, and so we have the Dharmakaya, or then we have the Nirmanakaya, the last of these three bodies, which is the manifested body, the body that manifests and benefits sentient beings. So we would talk about, for example, the Buddha as the great or the sublime, the supreme Nirmanakaya. So the supreme manifestation of enlightenment. Of course, if we look at the Buddha, we see the Buddha's form, and that's what enables us to relate to the teacher. We have a teacher, there's somebody there in a body. But what's really wonderful about the Buddha are all the qualities that you could say that are unseen. They're felt, like the compassion of the teacher, the warmth or insight, the intelligence and strength and all of that of the teacher. These are unseen qualities, and yet we can kind of perceive them, but they are communicated to us through the expression of the physical. So that's then the more subtle inner aspect, the Sambhogakaya. And what all of that comes from is not some, training in it and sort of developing compassion and then developing this and that. It's spontaneously something that arises as the natural display when there's no more confusion, when the Dharmakaya is realized. So the absence of confusion naturally plays out as the enjoyment body that then further manifests for the benefit of sentient beings. So we could say this first jewel of the Buddha is then that there is someone who has these qualities. So Khyentse Rinpoche then says, the Dharmakaya expresses itself as the five wisdoms: the wisdom of the absolute expanse, the mirror-like wisdom, the wisdom of equality, the all-distinguishing wisdom, and the wisdom of all-accomplishing action. So the Dharmakaya is not just blank nothingness, it manifests these qualities of non-confusion. Khyentse Rinpoche goes on to say, these five wisdoms appear as the Sambhogakaya Buddhas of the five families, who continually turn the wheel of Dharma in the Buddha fields for their perfect retinue of bodhisattvas. So for great bodhisattvas, they can perceive this subtle aspect. In some way, we perceive it too, but we just can't really connect with it unless there's somebody that embodies it for us. We can possibly intuit that there's a dimension of wisdom that is not held by ego. But it's only when it's manifest then that we can perceive it. But for those of subtle, with little obscuration, then they naturally perceive this quality of the enlightened dimension of the Sambhogakaya. Khyentse Rinpoche goes on to say, the Sambhogakaya Buddhas manifests in forms that can, the Sambhogakaya Buddhas, then further, then the more sort of manifest form of this, the Sambhogakaya Buddhas manifest in forms that can be perceived by ordinary beings, called the Nirmanakaya Buddhas. Buddha Shakyamuni is the preeminent example of a Nirmanakaya Buddha. So this is the Buddha, the jewel of the Buddha. The second jewel is the Dharma, the expression of the Buddha's wisdom for the sake of all beings, enabling them to escape from the suffering and ignorance in which they are immersed. So the Buddha can't beam us up. He can't just wave a magic wand saying, you're good, you're free. And well, if he could, he would, but we were somewhat densely caught, and so that's why the best the Buddha can do is to show us, talking to the intelligence that we possess within, then speaking to us as teachers, then the Buddha can show us what we need to do. And this is then the Dharma. This is the communication of the insights of enlightenment to us in a way that we can understand. And so also for that reason, then the Dharma is expressed in different ways according to the different cultures. Nowadays we have a language that's wasn't of the Dharma that wasn't heard in Tibet. We use the language of psychology and science and philosophy and what have you. And in Japan, there's a particular way of communicating the Dharma. In India, a particular way. In Tibet, you have particular ways. So there we have the different cultures of expression of the Dharma, and we also say according to the different dispositions. We have 84,000 different kinds of teachings. So that's the second jewel, the Dharma. The third jewel is the Sangha, which includes all who practice the path shown by the Buddha. Now, we very often would sort of joke a little bit about that, and people would say, I don't know if I really want to take refuge in that motley gang of, these other people. I'm in here with the Sangha. Do I really want to take refuge with them? And so sometimes we would say, when we say Sangha, we refer to the sublime beings, the stream enterers and the Aryas, the great Bodhisattvas and Arhats and so on. But we can also say that Sangha, as even including the ordinary persons, actually is important because it also means that we're not theistic, stuck with the notions that there are those who are beyond us. We should understand ourselves as beings that have removable obscurations. And so acknowledging the purity of the others is key, really, particularly those who have taken refuge in the Buddha Dharma Sangha and are practicing the path. They are removing their obscurations. And so the recognition of their potential and the respect for their aspirations and their path also then qualifies them as being an object of taking refuge. So these are the three jewels, and I think at this point we're actually time's up. So we'll continue here next week. See if there's any other questions. Oh. Okay, this was about the ngöndro practice. Yeah, I've seen your comments here. Okay, good. As long as I can keep practicing consistently for the benefit of both me and others, can I not worry about enlightenment? Yeah, that's good. Yeah, no need. Just practice, It's like if we're traveling somewhere, if we're traveling, then we're obviously doing the right thing. Then we needn't worry, We just keep traveling. Yes, we will arrive. Yes, good. Thinking about Dilgo Khyentse Rinpoche, do you think that him doing retreat for 20 years was somewhat didactic? What was he doing up there all that time? Yeah, well, we sometimes say that he did that, of course, to display sentient the path for sentient beings. Khyentse Rinpoche, he didn't do it all at once. It was over many periods and different times. But there could have been so many aspects to this that it's difficult for us to imagine. It's a little bit on the level of speculation. Anyway, we can rejoice in doing it for showing us and just thinking, gosh, he must have had such a wonderful time. Okay. What was he doing up there all that time? Well, whatever it is, I think we can just sort of in a very simple sense just rejoice and think, gosh, that was wonderful that he did that. Showed us the way. Okay. Mind you, you do have, we would say now Rinpoche did 6 months retreat on, say, the Chimapama Nyingte, or that if he was up there, we would say he did, a number of ngöndros, he was doing yoga practice, and so on. So many of the traditions of Tibetan Buddhism, they're very intricate, and there's many different practices, if you like, and lineages and so on. So all these practices of yoga and all the various ways of applying the Vajrayana methodology, Khyentse Rinpoche practiced these. So one of the great things about Dilgo Khyentse Rinpoche was his personal experience of so many of the different lineages and first-hand experience of so many aspects of the path. Okay, thank you. I'm remembering dedication today. I forgot last time. Through this virtue, may all beings throughout existence awaken together without a single being left behind. In the pure realm of the luminous essence, the ground of the great perfection, may they remain inseparable from the kayas and wisdoms. Through all our births, wherever we may be born, may we be endowed with the 7 good qualities of the higher realms. As soon as we are born, may we meet with the Dharma and have the freedom to practice it properly. At that time, may we please the holy gurus and practice the Dharma throughout the day and night. Realizing the Dharma and accomplishing its essential meaning, may we cross the ocean of existence in that life. Thoroughly teaching the holy Dharma in this world, may we never tire of accomplishing the benefit of others. By this vast benefit of others without partiality or bias, may all attain Buddhahood together. Thank you.